Okay, so this is tutorial number 23. This is a turn-based strategy game we're going to be making. A kind of old school, reminiscent of Japanese RPGs, one-on-one character with our rifleman character and our enemy robot here. Pretty awesome design, if I say. I must credit to Deborah, the other half of Big Toe, although she's giving me an angry look right now because I'm using...
Don't use my old art!
Because I'm using art of hers that's 5 or more years old, and she's come a long way since then. But I think it's great for what we're doing, especially, and especially this robot. I mean, how can you not like that design? But so this is what it is. It's a one-on-one turn-based strategy. 2 characters, hero, enemy. Let's get started in the main timeline. We've got no code at all in the main outer timeline. Just 2 layers, 2 pieces of the background. The sky and the lower part, the grass and the hills. You can see I'm toggling the sky on and off. So that's all, no code there. Now let's go over our library stuff real quick. We've got the background art. We've got the parts that make up the robot, the enemy robot. All the individual movie clips. And remember, my source file is linked in the description of this tutorial, so you're definitely gonna want to get that before doing this. You can also always substitute it with your own art. The movie clip itself, the entire character is here. The parts are in the folder. Same thing with the rifleman. This is the movie clip itself, a combination of all the parts. The parts themselves are located in this folder here. Other than that, it's just a couple of sounds for our attacks, and all the UI stuff I put in a folder, which there's 5 different UI pieces and an embedded font. So these are all pre-made. All the UI stuff is very simple. It's all one frame, I believe, because it's just static stuff. We've got these attack button, this defend button. Those are going to be the player's options. And then we have 2 health boxes, which are going to be dynamic text boxes for player health and enemy health. We're going to put it on the screen. And then we're going to have a 3rd box, which is a status box, and it just starts empty. And we're going to load text into it dynamically. So again, these are all dynamic text boxes. And they all have instance names within them. Our status box is going to display whose turn it is, and it's going to give us our game over or win condition messages. So that's set to export as status. And the other ones, I believe, are called enemy HP, lowercase e, and same thing with player HP. Just show you there. So they're all set to export dynamic text boxes. So this movie clip is 2 text boxes. One is actually, this doesn't even need to be dynamic. I'll turn it static. This doesn't change. This will be throwing an integer variable in here from our document class that will be the current health of the player and or the enemy. So I'm just neating this up. So the first steps here, we've got, so since we've got a document class and 2 characters, we're going to have a total of 3 Actionscript files, 3 classes that we're going to write. This is my reference backup, ignore that. So the first things first is to create all our variables in our document class, all our objects. So of course we're going to want, I'm going to call the robot hero because it's a hero, or excuse me, I'm going to call the rifleman our hero because that's our hero character. Rifleman, new rifleman. I'm going to call the robot the enemy because he is the enemy. Do not trust the robot. Ever. So we've got those two created. Then we're going to need to create all our UI objects. So if we just want to reference what those are called, it's annoying how Flash doesn't let you do that from within the text editor. But I'm just going to open that folder so I can see what they're all called. And I'm going to make my own variable name here. Our attack button. Whoops. Attack button. New attack button. Same thing with defend. Again, these are the on-screen buttons that are going to be the player's two options to select. You can, of course, build on this to no end and add all kinds of things. So that's the two on-screen buttons. Now let's do the health boxes for both the player and the enemy. Let's call, let's use a capital letter, whereas the lowercase letter will be the instance name in the timeline there. So we'll call it player HP, and that's going to be of type player health box. I'm just referencing from on the right of my screen. And this is enemy health box. And our final one is our status box. So I'm just going to call that status. Oops. And remember, these are just movie clips that contain dynamic text boxes. That's all they are. No frames, no animation. Very simple. So that's it. We're going to need to add a couple other property variables as we go on. Let me just reference what else I had. Of course, we need a current turn and we need a timer. This current turn is going to be a string that we're going to use to see whose turn it is. It's only going to be player's turn or enemy's turn, and of course we're starting on the player's turn, and then we're going to create a turn timer. All this is really a 1 second delay, so the turn doesn't end on the exact frame that you stop attacking, and more importantly for the enemy, it would look weird if you attack and the enemy instantly is doing its action. So you need to have some sort of a pause. So I just have a 1 second delay. That's really the whole purpose of the timer. There are different ways to do that, but this is an easy way. So let me just double check that. But yeah, these are all our variables we're creating in our document class. This is everything. There'll be a couple of properties within the rifleman object itself within that class. Same thing with the robot. But very, very simple stuff. So the first thing we're going to want to do inside of our constructor function for a document class, remember, every Actionscript class needs a constructor function, and that's the function that matches the name of the class. Main. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to call start game. And our start game function is going to load all our visual elements and set us up to get going. So first, let's make a function called load characters. let's do load interface. And we're going to want to load the listeners. Our listeners are going to, our event listeners, excuse me, are going to be for our buttons and for our turn timer here. What to do to basically switch turns when that goes off. So, and I should say that this is a really, really simple version of a state management system. When you're making a real game, you're going to want to control the game state. But this is kind of a really, really simplified version of that, and just the basic idea of keeping track of what state the game is in and not allowing states to overlap, having a clear sequencing of player chooses, action plays out, enemy's turn starts, enemy chooses an action, action plays out, that type of thinking. You want to make sure you're controlling the fact that the game can only be in one state at one time. A game as simple as this, we don't need to go into all that, but it's important to think about as you make a more complicated version of this, maybe if you want to build on it, that you're going to want to set up a more foolproof system of controlling the state of the game. Okay, so we've got that, so let's just go down our list here and let's load the characters. Now I am going to copy and paste this part because it's a lot of positioning, trial and error that there's no point wasting time on. Code that's very, very simple. So nothing you don't recognize here. We're taking the hero and positioning them, then adding them to the screen. Same thing with the enemy. I scaled the enemy down because I found out he was a little too big robot. And same thing with the enemy. Position, add to the screen, add to the document class. So that, keep in mind again, to just repeat the logic for the millionth time, adding a child to the parent object. It's all about, no matter what programming language or what program you're using to create your games, you want to have an understanding of the parent-child relationship. The hero and the enemy are childs of the parent movie clip, which in this case, not always, but in this case, is the document class. Which is great because they're accessible everywhere by just making reference to, since the document class is the structure and the foundation of the whole thing, we're adding children into it, and that's the best way to do it. So that's our load characters function. It's that simple. Load interface, and I'm just going to copy this because it's really simple. The listeners one we can write. Load interface. So what have we got here? Player HP. Remember, these are dynamic text boxes, these movie clips. So that's the movie clip itself. Notice the uppercase P. The lowercase p is the instance name. Oh, excuse me. I'm just going to go back and show you that, so you know. That's what we're referencing. Notice the lowercase p, since it's a child of it, I figured that's an easy way to remember it. Player HP is the instance name. It's nested inside of this player HP movie clip, which is, you know, this object there in the library. We're talking to the text property, the only real property that you tend to use. Text property, we're converting it into a string because we're using a variable called health, which I understand we haven't made yet. And we can do that in a second because we will get an error if we don't. So we're looking at a property of our hero class, our rifleman there. at the health property. So we can go ahead and same thing with the enemy. We're looking at the enemy's health property. We're positioning them and we're adding them to the screen. Before I digress, we can simply go into the hero, the rifleman, and add that health property. It's an integer. It starts at 100. I'm going to copy that because the robot's the same thing. Health, 100. So now they have a unique property that we can reference and change from anywhere, depending on how we reference it. If we're referencing it from the document class, we have to say which object we're talking about, the hero. If we reference it from within the class itself, we don't have to say, right? We would just write health equals 20. I misspelled that. Heath. What the hell is Heath? So, just want you to understand the relationship between referencing and understanding the scope with which your code is being run. Of course, I'm not inside of a function here, so I wouldn't do that. But the point is, inside of this class, I don't need to make reference to anything. Whereas in the document class, I need to write hero.health. Otherwise, the program goes, what is this? This is not a property. There's no property in the document class called health, is there? No. So that's simple. Same thing with the enemy. Position them, add them to the screen. Our status box is the same thing. Now notice what's different about the status box. We're loading into it the current turn. We will use it later to display the game winning condition, but mainly it's used, it's taking this current turn variable, which is a string of type string. So notice how we don't have to convert it to a string. These are integers. We're converting to strings. This is a string. So our status box, again, that's in the library here. This lowercase status is the same thing, just like these two. It's the instance name of that dynamic text box. So again, the document class, uppercase, lowercase for the child object's instance name. Status text equals, setting it equal to the current turn at the beginning. And we're going to do that as the turn switches. We're going to update the UI. That'll be the name of the function to do that. So that's that. Our last function here to get started, well actually we have two more to get kind of things rolling, is load listeners. And again, remember why I'm writing void at the end of all my functions, or almost all of them, is because it tells the program we're not returning anything. Our return type is void. It's just a little way to improve performance. What did I do? Okay. So what listeners do we need? Okay, we have an attack button and we have a defend button. Those, of course, are going to need mouse listeners. And we have a turn timer. That's going to need a timer event. We're going to have to listen for timer event. Just one event. It's pretty simple. Same thing with these, just a click event. So we've got a total of 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Whoops. 2, 3. So load listeners. So let's attack button, add event listener, add event listener. Mouse event. Which mouse event are we looking for? We are looking for the click event. And we're going to call that, sorry, I forgot what I named that function. Player attack and player defend. That makes sense, doesn't it? There we go. Listeners. Psh. Defend. Player attack. Player defend. Those are the two abilities of the player. And our third one, remember, is our turn timer. So, turn timer, add event listener, timer event timer. The timer event complete is for if you want to have multiple runs of the timer, and the complete one would only run on the last run. Just something to keep in mind. Turn timer, I believe, was called function. Change, we're just going to change. Change turn. Yeah, that makes sense. That function will be responsible for just what it's called. So we've set up our listeners, we've set up our interface, we've set up our characters. Since it's been a while, let's save and take a look at what we've got. Okay. Oh, I know what I didn't do. Why are we getting these 1136 errors? Incorrect number of arguments? Well, what's an argument? An argument is something that's passed into a function. So, what did we not do? You can probably get, without even looking at what line they're referencing, well, we didn't pass in what we needed to. So, let's look at this here. Line 12. Ah, that was a typo. Okay, so if we have access of undefined properties: player attack, player defend, and change turn. Well, that's because we haven't written these functions yet. So let's go ahead and make empty functions here. And remember, this is where you have to make sure you're passing in, you're telling it which argument you're going to be passing into it. Because we're sending this mouse event. Remember, when you have a listener and you have a handler. Listener, handler function. So we're taking an event that you can write. Remember, this can be called whatever you want because you're naming it, but this has to be set to mouse event because that's what is being passed into it. Player attack, player defend, and change turn. Now that one I won't copy because I have to write a different type of argument, don't I? That will be a timer event. So those are just empty functions I'm just writing so we don't get those errors, because I want you to see that that's what we have right now. All our status boxes are there, all of that. Our buttons are not there yet. Why did I not have my buttons? Where are the buttons? Oh, right, because it's not player's turn yet. So we haven't told it yet to load the player's options. We don't want those to always be there, because that would be odd, especially if it were the enemy turn, wouldn't it? So we're going to make a function called load player options. And we're going to call it, I'll write a note in here, since the game is just starting, set to player's turn. So of course we won't always be on the player's turn, but game starting. So we need a function called load player options, which which essentially loads the rest of the interface. I kept it separate because these things always need to be here, the health and the status box. But the player's options should not be there during the enemy turn or after you've selected an action. Public function, load player options. And just for the sake of neatness, if you want, we could put it here to keep all the kind of loading functions together. So what is that going to do? That's going to add the buttons to the screen, the attack and defend button. It's going to position them. And again, I'm going to copy that because just like this other stuff, it's mindless busy work. Do you really want me to give you that? So position them, add them to the screen. Same old, same old. So now, because remember our start game function is called in our constructor function, meaning the first thing we do when the game is loaded up, we run our constructor function, the function that matches the name of the class. Boom, start game. Start game runs, load characters, load interface, load listeners, and the last thing, load player options, because it's the first time the game's running. So now we should have our buttons, and we do. Now they won't do anything, they'll probably throw an error because I've grayed out their commands in the player's timelines, which I'm going to show you in the movie clips themselves. Yeah, they don't do anything right now. But the point is, all our visual elements are now here. Everything. So these will change when you or the robot takes damage, and this will change once we make it, depending on whose turn it is and whether the game's over or not. But first step before we even deal with updating this status stuff, we've got to make sure our options are working. So let's go in and actually make our players' abilities, our attack and defend button, those two options, make them do something. So let's look at that. Really, really simple function. I'll do this in a pair because it's very similar. You can see that we're going to be adding in a new function that's just going to do the opposite of the load player options. It's going to take the player options off the screen because we want to do that once we've queued up a command. So before I get into the timeline, might as well just handle this UI stuff. Where the heck is that function? Now keep in mind, all we're doing here is removing those buttons from the screen. That's it. So remember, these are our handlers for our listeners right here. Attack listener calls the player attack function. Defend button calls the player defend function. There they are. And as soon as those buttons are clicked, of course we want to remove the two buttons from the screen. It would look weird if the turn was playing out and they were still there. So we're going to call this remove player options function. And it's even simpler than the load because it's just removing them. So what we do, it will throw an error if we try to remove them when they're already removed. So this is kind of a fail-safe. I believe I was getting it in some instance without having it. So you're checking to see if this contains, I don't know if we've gone over this command yet. So this being, what is this? This is always referring to the current movie clip, the current scope that your code is being run in. So this, in this case, the document class, the main movie clip. If this contains a tag button, we only have to check for one because we know they're both together. If it contains a tag button, remove them both. That's simple. That's all we're doing. Water. All right, so my wife's laughing at the random things that I say sometimes. So I just took a drink of water. Thought you guys should know that. So before I digress further, I want to show you what's actually happening when those buttons are clicked because we haven't gone over that. Now this stuff has been grayed out because I set it up and it would throw errors if it were active. So let's look at the attack first. Hero, remember that's our rifleman character from our library. Go to and play, attack. Now I want to know we're using frame labels for all these options, and there'll be more later, because you don't want to use specific frames because that can get you change one thing, and your frame is suddenly off. So just keep in mind that's why I use frame labels, and you can see in our timeline, frame label attack. Defend to normal. These are different poses. So you've got 3 different frame labels that we can call from anywhere in our code if we reference the hero. So this is kind of a complicated animation setup here. I made these animations and set up classic tweens. Why is it closing? Trying to show you the full character. Being glitchy. There we go. So we've just got a stop command in the beginning of both of our hero and robot to make sure it doesn't play. Then we've got 3 different, in this case, in the hero's case, 3 different animations. The first one is our attack. It's going to look stupid because it's going to play and loop, but there you go, the most over-exaggerated sound of a little rifle firing. It's great. So that sound is from Urban Santa. For any fans that might know that, all 6 of you out there. So we've got our attack, our animation right there, and now. My wife is laughing. I made one person laugh. Success. So we've got a couple of commands here at certain points. So this is the point. I feel like I'm digressing here, but I'll try to keep it simple. We're going to call a function that tells us a character has been hit. That's simply placed here because that's when the bullet will hit the robot. That's about the spot the robot will be in the game. Just something I played around with. When we get to the end of our animation, we always stop because we don't want the timeline to continue running. And, it would look odd, obviously. You'd be seeing animations you shouldn't. So, another function we're going to write, start the next turn. Start turn timer. So once our action's been done, we want to start the turn timer, etc., which will go off and change turns. That's our attack. Our defend. It's a little animation of kind of holding up the gun to protect himself from the robot's brutality. There you go, that's all it. And then when they get to the end of that animation, we always stop. We set up this defending property, which I haven't done. I'll show you. And again, we start the turn timer. The common thing is whenever turn ends, we got to start the turn timer and tell it which turn it's going to be going to. So that was my digression. This last one just returns the pose to normal from defend. Because obviously you want to start each turn character looking the same. So just going to save that. So that's our hero, our rifleman's timeline. Again, we're just looking at the attack first, so let's try to handle that by itself. Go to and play attack. Okay, well we just saw what that is. Go here, play this, and of course we need to have things happen. The sound plays. We need to tell the game that a character was hit. There's no missing in this game, although you could add that. That happens at the moment the bullet hits him. The bullet will then disappear in this next frame, you'll notice. Then when it's all over, we stop the timeline and we tell the turn timer to start. So we've got a couple of things to do right before this will work. So first, actually we're not even going to do the character hit first one because that deals with HP and stuff like that. First I'm just going to try to set up the turn system. So I'm going to ungray that out, uncomment it out, proper term. So what are we doing here? From within the hero character, the rifleman, the hero, in the code he's known as the hero, we're calling our parent. Movie clip, the document class is a movie clip, right? It is. And it's also the parent of this object because we loaded it in as a child. Right? Add child. I'm not going to show you, but you get it. Movie clip parent, start turn timer, and we're passing in, this is a parameter. The function takes a parameter. You call it a parameter on this end, you call it an argument on the other end. So the parameter that's required is turn timer. So is a string. So it's either going to be this string or player's turn, one of the two. So let's write that function, start turn timer. That should go before the change turn function, logically. Start turn timer. Remember, it takes a string. So just call it turn. Put your void. Turn, and I'm just going to reference this because it'll be quicker. I called it who turn. Well, we'll just call it turn right now. So start turn timer. So this is our function, 2 lines. That's it. We take a string in, which will either be player's turn or the enemy's turn. You can see that we're referencing this string property of our document class. It's initially set to player's turn. Of course, after the player does his action, we want it to be set to enemy's turn, right? Which is why we're sending this piece of text in. There's only 2 different things it could be because we only have 2 characters. So we're setting the current turn equaled to turn. And we will now reference that when the timer goes off. It's always better, if you have an important property, you should store it in the document class so it can be referenced. Rather than, if something's only needed within that function, I could just use this local variable. This turn is it's a local variable of type string. But the beauty of when you have something as a global variable, if you want to call it that, a document class level variable, you can take local variables and store them in it and access them across all your functions in that class, or even other classes if you reference the class that you're going to be talking about. So we're taking this local string we're passing in and we're storing it in our global level string, current turn. Okay, so now current turn is going to be equal to the enemy's turn. We're going to start our turn timer. I hope you're following me here. Turn timer start. Just going to go back to the listener. Turn timer add listener. When the timer goes off, it takes a second. We change turns. Call the change turn function, which of course is empty right now. So this one is a little more complex, so I am going to copy that here. And don't worry, I am going to go through it in detail. Some extra white space here. Oops. Okay. So we've got that public function, change turn, timer event. I'm tracing the change turn out so we know. I'm going to gray out this update UI for now, since that's not written yet. Also going to gray that out since that's not written yet. So what have we got here? Remember we just set this variable here equal to enemy's turn because it's now the enemy's turn. So what does this change turn function do? It checks that string variable I just talked about. It's only going to be equal to one of these two things. If it's equal to player's turn, that means we're going to the player's turn. So what are we doing? We're checking what we have to do. Because we have that option to defend, we're checking if defending is true. Again, I haven't written that, so I'll go and written that now because I think it's a worthy diversion because we're referencing it now, and it's really simple. Defending, it's a Boolean variable. Set it to false. I'm going to copy it because it's exactly the same for the enemy. These are the only two properties our characters are going to have. You could, of course, add much more very easily. Defending, a Boolean, initially set to false. Remember, the enemy robot can also defend. I haven't showed you that yet. So if the hero is defending, if it's true, we're going to go to and play defend to normal, which was that final animation here, since we want him to return to that normal pose when the next turn starts. So we have to take him back from where he was. So play back to normal, which again matches the beginning pose. So that's the top half. If we're not defending, if defending is true, do this, else, meaning if you're not defending, you just simply load the two buttons back to the screen. There's nothing else to do, right? That means he attacked in the last turn. He's already returned to the pose. All you need to do, add the buttons back. That's it. So that's that. But our first example was we're now going to the enemy turn since the player started. So if that current turn variable equals enemy turn, more water, which it does now, we want to do the same thing. We want to check if the enemy is defending. The enemy has that same animation. I'm not going to show you right now. It's just It's just returning from the defense pose to the normal pose. If that's the case, if they were defending, we have to do that first. Otherwise, the enemy's turn is as simple as calling this one function, which I have grayed out because I haven't written, and it's a bit complicated. So I want to first show you. Let's see if our attack is going to work. I don't know if it is yet. If I missed something, let's see. Okay, it did work. And you can see we also traced change turn. That's why I set that up. So technically now we've moved into the enemy's turn. The HP hasn't changed, our status box hasn't changed because we haven't written the update UI function, which I might as well show you now before we actually do the robot's turn. So let's do that. Before we get to the robot's turn is all handled. One function controls our enemy's thinking. Of course, it's a very simple game, but you could make it much more complex, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to do simple AI that will make you realize that some of the games you've played are really not that complicated in terms of what the enemy's doing. They just tend to stack the cards against you. So I'm going to ungray that out because we want to now create this update UI function. And you can imagine what it's going to do. It's pretty simple. It just sets the current values. I'm going to copy that. Where should that go? Well, it can go right here, since it's related to that as well. Update UI. 3-line function. Since we have 3 kind of status boxes, right? We have 3 different boxes that change information. 3 dynamic text boxes. Player health, enemy health, and status box, the lower one in the middle. So we're going to call this function whenever we change turns or whenever someone is damaged or when the game ends. So player HP dot player HP, lowercase, notice, text equals string hero health, enemy health, current turn. This is just about the same as when we first loaded it. Of course, now, since we're calling it after a turn was changed, we're putting in that text box the current turn, which will change from player's turn to enemy turn. Should. So let's see that. Okay, I clicked the attack button. Notice it changed. It changed after a second, right? Because that's our turn timer. And you can change that to whatever number you want. Remember here, I have it on a 1 second delay, 1,000 milliseconds. So, or milliseconds? I don't know. So, that's all we're doing there. What we haven't done is dealt with the damage. We'll do that before we get to the enemy turn, since that's kind of a hole left filling. So that also is a bit of a more complicated function that I'm going to walk you through. So on the frame in my timeline, when I've determined, remember this is about the distance the robot is in the game, so I've just determined that that's a good frame to make the bullet disappear and to calculate our damage. So I'm going to ungray this out, and we're going to write the function that it's calling, which is the character hit function, which we haven't written. So it's one of the more complicated ones, maybe the most complicated of the game, but still pretty easy. Come on, lag. You can do it. Okay, let's copy this, and we're going to go through it in detail. I'm going to gray out some stuff that's not necessary right now. These are win conditions. Um, okay, so we're going to be adding a critical hit to the enemy too, um, which isn't there yet. So, but I'm going to leave that in for now. Just ignore that part. I'll get to it. So, this is our character is hit function. So we're actually going to pass in. I forgot this part. I'm going to pass this in. I wanted to make it a little more interesting, a little more variability. So I'm going to pass into it this variable. Only the enemy can do critical hits. I figured it was too easy from playing it if we didn't have that variable in there. It's a bit of a risk whether to attack or defend. So I'm just going to tell it false. So this character hit function will take a parameter, true or false, a simple Boolean. So remember, again, only the robot can do critical hits, so it'll always be false for the hero. So is it a critical hit? Boolean. In this case, it won't be. So how does this function work? We're taking... You could break this up into the enemy was hit or the player's hit, and you might want to do that if the game's more complicated, if you build on it. But I wanted to show you how you can save lines of code and keep from repeating yourself, which is a common problem a lot of early programmers have. Not copy and pasting and writing the same code over and over and just changing a little bit. Here, we're taking this, we've created a local movie clip variable called character. And we're going to set it to whoever we're talking about based on looking at our current turn global string. If the player's turn, remember we're talking about who was hit here. So it's the reverse of what you might think. So if the current turn is equal to player turn, which it is in our first example, right? We just fired. So the character hit is the enemy. The character hit. We're inside of the character hit function. Character hit is the enemy. So it's sort of the opposite of what you might think. So we're talking about the enemy now. So that means once you set this up, the whole function relates to one or the other. Now we're talking about the enemy. If the character was defending, we apply a set amount of damage to his health property. He's not defending in this first turn. So I'm going to bypass that for now. Else, character's not, meaning else the character is not defending. If it was a critical, again, that only applies to the robot. So we're going to ignore that. So we're going to be dealing with this one right here. The robot was not defending. So we're sort of looking at this whole block right now. This whole half is for defending. We're not defending, and it's not a critical. So which means we're dealing with this right here. Character.health. Remember, the character is the enemy in this case. That's the beauty of having, just like I showed you in my Urban Santa breakdown, it's the beauty of having properties that are named the same across multiple objects and characters. You can condense code. Health, defending, they're both the same. Character health minus 25. So that 100 should go to 75. And what do? Whenever damage was dealt or turn changes or the game's over, we update the UI. We call that same function again. Update UI. This last part of the function, which I won't go into detail on now, it's really simple, but it just deals with what happens if either character's health is less than or equal to 0. Of course, that means the game's over. Either you've won or you've lost. So we deal with that. We'll deal with that at the end. So let's just look and let's see if we got to the next step and the damage is dealt. There we go. It changed to 75, from 100 to 75 because we dealt we reduced the health property of the character that was hit, which was the enemy, by 25. Minus equals 25. And now we've switched to the enemy turn. So just so we can get a full turn going, we're now going to deal with the robots side of it. And let me look at how long this tutorial is running, because this is probably a good place to end. So I'm going to divide this into 2 tutorials since we're already at almost an hour. So in part 2, we're gonna finish the other half of this. We're gonna do the robots, the enemy AI function, which I referenced to but didn't show you or write yet. We're gonna deal with that. We're gonna make sure it loops back properly. Everything cycles back, and then we're gonna end the game and display the message to the player that they've won the game. And that'll be on the next tutorial, which I'm going to do right now. Alright. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. And, oh, wait a minute. Oh no, someone's been messing with my code. Robert! That one was for you, Squiddy McCloud.